Cecily will help us to talk about these opportunities, the very important opportunities that have been there, always so diverse and so big opportunities like the ones that we have had in this continent, in Latin America and Africa and the Latin America. Sometimes we have not paid enough attention to these areas as we should. To talk about between this horizontal conversation between these two regions that have shared pasts and huge challenges at the economical level, technological and environmental challenges, and of course many opportunities. So today we have 4 panelists. We'll start with FC Campbell, most likely, as you know, the former Vice President of Costa Rica. Welcome, FC. Besides being the vice president, she is also the promoter of the International Day of the African Descendants in the General Assembly of the UN, and she led the permanent forum of African Descendants in this organization between 2022 and 2024. Welcome, FC. We also have here, let's see, how can I pronounce his name? Okechukwu, the General Director of Operations, the Caribbean Office of African Export-Import Bank, the Africa Bank. Welcome. We also have Alvin, the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa.
Mr. Boats. Y finalmente acabamos con Daniel Best.
We have Daniel Best, the President of the Caribbean Development Bank. Welcome, Mr. Best. We are going to have this conversation in both languages. So I would like to start with the former Vice President of Costa Rica, Mrs. Campbell. This is not just a milestone for the region, and that is worth to remember, you know. In 2018, you became the first deputy vice president, president in Latin America and also for the Caribbean after for 150 million that divide themselves as Afro-descendants, more an important amount of percentage in the region. Can you hear me? Because they are telling me. All right, but he's also an important defender, champion for social justice. I would like to ask you, I wanted to ask you from your perspective, how the cooperation in Latin America and the Caribbean can become a tool to reduce inequality, historical inequalities, and to promote as well development in both continents. Antimony, this worked perfectly well. Can you hear me? Excellent. First, we must create and set clear goals, such as multiplying trades, creating strategic partnerships in the development of the infrastructure. We have strategic partnerships to work in a much more effective way. now the opportunity of the CELAC Summit of the Africa Union in next March in Bogota, promoted by the government of Colombia, as you mentioned. What do you think is missing? But perhaps we can do it first between two regions that they have the need of a larger development with some pilots that we can develop locally so they can start processes. Let me go even more specific here. We need to create an agenda with concrete outcomes. So it's an agenda where we can say we are going to advance on these regulations areas. We have advanced on using the CELAC, for example, the Latin American Bank of Investments, as a partnership with the African Development of Bank, so we can foster banking for women and development. So then we will be the pioneers globally. I believe that that is the pathway. The roadmap, that is the advantage. I feel that we need to see that as an advantage. The advantage is that we are starting as a clean board. Because now we have the possibility of writing everything from zero, creating partnerships in moments of global transformation. These are moments with evidently the transformation and the geopolitics, the focus is changing, are changing, and this moment to consolidate partnerships that will allow us to really, truly ensure the dignity and the development, not just for the countries as a whole, but also for the people, the urge for the insurance of the well-being. Thank you very much. Thank you, Epsi.
We are now traveling to both Africa and to the Caribbean with Mr. Jerica, the Regional Chief Operating Officer of Afrexim Bank, and its Caribbean office. Welcome. And let's talk about business opportunities. Mrs. Campbell was talking about these opportunities that both regions have. Latin American countries annually import nearly $12 billion in products from Africa and export more than 18 billion, and it's mainly vegetables, primarily corn. Yeah. So what are the main challenges you are facing while trying to connect these two regions commercially? What's your experience after 2 years working in Barbados?
Well, thank you very much for that question. So what I think is that she's absolutely right. Even with that number of trade that has taken place between Africa and the Latin American region, there is still opportunity and potential for more trade to take place. We have not been able to, but it's not enough for us to talk about those problems from morning till night. It's for us to say, what solutions can we put in place to address them? And what can we do to make sure that we now create a more connected Africa, Caribbean, and Latin America trade corridor? Now, one of the challenges is absolutely because what we see traded is raw commodities, no value add. We end up outsourcing labor from our region and then importing finished products from the raw material that are coming from our region. And when you are exporting raw commodities, then it makes it difficult for you to export within other developing countries like ourselves. So it means that one of the key solutions that need to be created is the value-added export potentials to enhance it for the purpose of making sure that when we are trading, we are trading goods, not just raw commodities, but those that have value added to them. And this is why, for us in Afrexim Bank, one of the strategic pillars of the bank is focused on export development. It's one of the strategic pillars. And also, for those who don't know much about our Afrasian Bank, I think it makes sense also to step back a little bit and make a little introduction of the bank to showcase why we think connecting South-South trade is absolutely important. Now, we have about 3 decades of operation, having been set up to promote intra-African trade, that's trade between Africa and itself, as well as focus on South-South trade collaboration, which at the time didn't have anybody to focus on that. So for us, it's one of the key priority areas. We need to be able to create solutions, enablement that will ensure that we facilitate this kind of trade. Now, taking that further, we now find out that trade between Africa, yes, we've made tremendous success in that. We've supported actively the setup of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which ultimately will create one of the biggest free trade areas in the world. So Africa has over 1 billion people population, so that's massive. So once linked up with the Caribbean, with the Latin America, that creates a sustainable market on itself. So it means that trade sufficiently can take place between these regions without the rest of the world. Now, I think that's one of the values that has come from the concerted effort that Afrasian Bank is making in this area. And we also believe strongly that with the geopolitical setup, what we're seeing on the geopolitical levels, that conversation about South-South trade is not just supposed to be rhetoric. It's supposed to be something that's given a lot more priority attention for us to be able to now give it the life it deserves, for us to create that trade corridor. Now, 2 years on in the Caribbean, of course, having been set up in 2023, August 2023 precisely, the bank have seen that there are similarities of need between Africa and the Caribbean. Both of us are at the same level, pursuing development, need for industrialization, need for infrastructural development, need for capacity building for those who are going to play key areas. And the good thing about it is that prior to coming, we have over 3 decades of operation in Africa where we have developed tailor-made solutions that can address some of these core areas where there are challenges. And what we've seen happen now is more like a plug-and-play scenario, where now it's easy for us to deploy those solutions into the Caribbean, and we've seen that instantly we have ramped up operation within 2 years. And that is why just 2 years on, we have over 700 million approved credits that are being disbursed, targeting strategic areas, infrastructure, tourism, sustainable development programs and so on that are now impactful and then targeted towards solving this challenge that is there. The other priority area we think will work out eventually is when we are able to create that sea and air connectivity between the region, because currently we need to transit through the global west for us to connect between ourselves, and that is another area we think is of priority, and once solved will help us fix this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What innovative financial instruments could be jointly developed between Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean to boost trade, investment, and sustainable development within the South-South framework?
Yes, I like the word jointly because here there is absolute need for collaboration. Nobody can do it alone. That's why we are grateful to CAF for bringing us here, that we are now coming in together jointly with another development finance institution from this region to now talk about how to create common solutions for Africa, for the Latin American region as well. So for us, we think there is need for that collaboration at the financing level, where the institutions from both regions can think about how they can come together, putting funds that can address specific areas of interest. I'm thinking about something like infrastructure fund. I'm thinking about something like climate fund that can address specific areas of development of both regions. And this is something that, with the collaboration we're seeing with ourselves, my brother in CDB, the president of CDB, is also here. Those kind of collaboration now will now create the impetus that is needed to advance some of the causes that we are all pushing individually. And for us, like I said earlier, is about buttressing the point that there are similarities of problems, means that the solutioning can also be the same. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. We find out that SME targeted finance is important and it has helped in Africa. We are deploying that absolutely here. We find out that the industrialization drive is absolutely required. So in Africa, we've created well over 10 special economic zones that are working, that has helped create employment and retain value add for manufactured products in the continent. And we're also now looking to deploy same in the region. So having considered, currently considering potentials in Guyana, in Suriname, in Jamaica as well, to see how we can also replicate those values. So now you see how those synergies are working. Now we're seeing things where we can also empower local content players, right? So in Nigeria and some other African oil-producing countries, for instance, we were able to create solutions that helped retain value within the oil servicing space locally. And we are also looking to replicate that in major Caribbean countries that have discovered oil. Talk about Suriname, talk about Guyana, where we are launching a local content program that will help fund the local suppliers to the international oil majors, to help them also make sure that they don't outsource the labor, they don't outsource value from the country, and then retain a huge volume of those solutions internally. And these are just a few. The others are payment solutions. The Pan-Africa Payment and Settlement System has worked excellently well in creating alternative payment solutions for regional trade in Africa. We're working with the Caribbean Association of Central Banks to deploy that in the region. So we're having Caribbean payment and settlement system in the works to be developed and linked with PAPs to now create a seamless regional payment platform that can facilitate intra-regional trade between the region and so on. So this is just a few. I know I could talk on and on, but it's massive and the opportunities are too numerous, so taking advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to talk about these huge opportunities that we have Mr. Alvin Boats from South Africa, the Deputy Minister of International around the region. And you know there are a lot of opportunities, some of them that are missed from your point of view. What should these two regions be doing in order to improve this South-to-South agenda?
Yes, no, thank you very much. I think the first problem statement is that the current economic trade flows between the African continent and CELAC as a region, we speak about less than 2% of global trade. So your political relationship is not reconcilable with your economic relationship. So that is the first issue. What we need, obviously, is to have in place an appropriate mechanism. That mechanism, of course, should be through the African Union and CELAC. For an example, South Africa has a particular trade incentive established between our country and the Mercosur economic group. But that only encapsulates a very few countries from within the region. So we should be arguing for a more formalized mechanism between these two continents. I am raising this because the opportunities are huge. For an example, as we speak, the African continent only trades 16% amongst themselves. This is the entire African continent. So when you have foreign direct investment that flows into Africa, invest in manufacturing, create industrialization, you'll then be able to produce products and services that will be on sale in the African continent, you'll be then able to get a privilege of your more than 90% tariff reduction. For an example, if you invest in South Africa, we are also part of the only customs union on the African continent. You'll be able then to also be exempted in terms of your excise and customs duty. So it's very big, but what is the flagship programs of the African Union? We speak about investment in infrastructure. We know that there's a very big energy infrastructure deficit on the African continent. We know that the renewable based economy in terms of energy and green economy is the future. And we should acknowledge that all your minerals that is necessitated for a renewable economy to a large extent are found within the African continent. So we are making a case on the African continent for countries from this region to invest in particular in our energy deficit. It's a huge investment program, of course. For example, if you look at South Africa, we are speaking about 14,000 kilometers of the expansion of your electricity transmission lines that are project ready, that require investment. So the African continent are not unique investment offerings. What is regrettable, of course, is that our investment partners, to a large extent, is your more industrialized North economies. It's more Asia and the Middle East. And we are coming here today to make a business case that we would want to trade with people, companies, multinational companies from this part of the world. Because we have so much more to gain based on our historical lineage, the fact that the African diaspora is located with this region. So that is what we are submitting.
Thank you so much. Within the last year, both Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean have lost some of its traditional donors in terms of international cooperation, especially the US. How can global South countries strengthen their voice to promote a new global leadership?
Well, of course, I think it's important that you have brought into fore the difficulty that faced the world at this moment in terms of your trade wars, unilateral, or your trade punitive measures. We, from South Africa, have a very unique partnership. You know that we are part of the BRICS Plus groups, which not only focus on political and security cooperation, it also speaks about financial and economic cooperation. We are obviously piloting our BRICS payment and settlement mechanism, which will actually enable settlement in local currency in terms of your trade relations. So that is a fantastic opportunity, BRICS partner country, to be able to benefit from the market capitalization from the new development bank. So this is a very unique opportunity of how to insulate ourselves from and how to open them up.
Daniel Best, which is the president of the Caribbean Development Bank. And Mr. Best, if I think about the Caribbean or they're about a beautiful paradise, of course, I think about resilience against the climate change. And innovative financial mechanisms does the Caribbean Development Bank have that align economic growth with environment that can be useful in building this South-to-South agenda?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you. Thank you very much for the question. You know, when we think about rush to designing new things and developing new products and coming up with fancy names and snappy acronyms, But it's getting late in the day here, and I know we've all been up from quite early. So I just want to urge us to bring it a little bit back to why we are here. And that is people. It's about people. Before we jump to the new products and the innovative designs, it's about people. And therefore, with that in mind, innovation, in my mind, and shifting who determines. So with that as our guiding point, CDB was a financial house. And in being a founding partner of CIFI, we were also, we took an equity stake in the development of the $200 million US Caribbean Sustainability Fund, which focused on developing products in the Caribbean and Latin America, financed by the Caribbean and Latin America, delivering solutions to the people of this region. But let's look further, let's look within the Caribbean now. In December last year, our board approved, the Caribbean Development Bank's board approved the Caribbean Community Resilience Fund, developed by Cygnus, an equity house out of Jamaica, $250 million US, again, which will be developing projects within the Caribbean. But not just looking at, not just looking at projects within the Caribbean that are ready, but providing technical assistance to businesses within the Caribbean to help them prepare their projects and get them to a stage of readiness for capital investment. My brother O'Keefe from Afrexim speaks about the importance of trade, and we are locked in on that. But what does that look like, right? We know, for instance, in the Caribbean, I'm speaking about the Caribbean here, we have excess of US $7 billion in liquidity in our commercial banking sector, sitting, doing nothing. But what we have also is approximately US $10 billion in demand. So we have entrepreneurs and businesses with approximately US $10 billion in ideas that are going nowhere. And we have $6 billion, $6 to $7 billion in funding that isn't reaching them. So we have a disconnect. We in the multilateral development banking community can't continue to sit on the sidelines and hope that it is figured out between the banking sector and the private sector and government. So what does CDB do? Last year we developed a trade finance guarantee program, providing first loss guarantees to the commercial banks, but also facilitating the movement of goods and services intra-regionally, and yes, across the Atlantic to Africa and to other parts of the world. We didn't stop there. We provided TA to those businesses to become ready to move their finances. We didn't stop there. We have determined that many, and it's not an indictment on commercial banks, but just by virtue of the fact that they haven't done it very often, most commercial banks and the loans officers that these entrepreneurs will face have no idea how to appraise these projects. So we're actually undertaking training in the commercial banking sector such that when these new businesses are cleared for loans, and they go into the bank, officers will know how to appraise it, thereby unlocking trade. So it is an ecosystem of moving capital within the region and facilitating the businesses within the region to move capital out of the region. Oki touched on it, and I think we all know, given how 2026 has started, that we need to draw closer to our friends. We need to determine who our friends are and draw closer to them. And this is, look, as many of our leaders have said, every sovereign entity has the right to determine its own direction. And that also includes the Caribbean.